Amala, I have a chainsaw on my arm. I'll be fine.
What you want from me? Really, really want from me? You don't know me, nah, you don't know me. What you want from me? Really, really want from me? You don't know me, nah, you don't know me. Yo, I'm fly, I'm the female boss, I'm #1.
MadWorld, probably most famous for being an incredibly violent title that released on the Nintendo Wii of all things, a mostly family-friendly console. I'm honestly surprised this bloody thing came out in Australia, considering it was banned in Germany and the director of Media Watch UK wanted the game to be refused from being sold in the UK. But games being controversial is nothing new, and it also has nothing to do with the quality of the title, which is what I'm here to discuss. MadWorld is the first ever title released by Platinum Games. It's directed by Shigenori Nishikawa and stars one chainsaw-wielding badass Jack Kamen.
Jack. Just Jack.
MadWorld's plot focuses on Vatican City being attacked by terrorists called the Organizers, who are blocking any way of exiting the city and are also disabling all cell phones and the internet so they can't contact the outside. And that was all done to set the stage for Death Watch, a game show where whoever is the last person standing will win $100 million and the right to live. And just to give everyone a nice little nudge to get into the murdering mood, the Organizers released a virus into the city and will only give the vaccine out to people who have murdered another. Oh, yikes. Jack Kamen enters the games and attempts to become the #1 ranking player. His motivations for doing so aren't clear at first, but as the game progresses it becomes obvious that Jack isn't who he seems.
Wow, you're chock full of helpful hints.
MadWorld is a stylish action game where you progress through a stage trying to rack up as many points as possible. You gain points by killing enemies and you gain the most points by inflicting the most pain upon the enemies before they manage to cark it. The controls of MadWorld are split up between the Wii Remote and the Nunchuck. The Nunchuck focuses on all movement actions, and the Wii Remote focuses on all attack actions. The basic attacks you have in MadWorld are press the A button to repeatedly punch enemies, hold A to grab objects or enemies, hold B and whip out your chainsaw and swing the Wii Remote horizontally or vertically to get your chainsaw to swing in that direction, which works very well since you only have to flick your wrist in a specific direction to get the input to register. As far as I'm concerned, this is probably the closest the gesture actions of the Wii Remote can come to the accuracy of a button press. You can also flick the Wii Remote upwards without holding B to perform a launcher attack on an enemy, and then press the A button to perform a quick instant kill combo, which looks really fancy but unfortunately doesn't net many style points. If you flick the Wii Remote horizontally, you'll send your enemies flying, really useful for sending them into rose bushes, into the water, or on a dartboard, into a jet turbine, or just whatever happens to be around at the time. The Nunchuck will perform all your movement actions as stated before. The analog stick is used for moving Jack. Z allows Jack to jump. A flick of the Nunchuck will perform an evade move, and the C button will reset the camera, and if you hold it down it'll lock onto an enemy a la Z targeting in Legend of Zelda. The camera for the most part works really well. The levels are very open, so the camera very rarely ever gets locked inside geometry. Considering the lack of an analog stick for camera movement, it all works really well. Although I do wish there was an option of being able to use the lock-on as a way to view the enemy health, or if there was just some way to figure out how much health an enemy has. That way if you're setting up for something that'll give you big points, but you don't notice the dude running around with a signpost through his head is about to die, you could prioritize the enemy and shove them on a rose bush, allowing you to get the maximum amount of points. But right now there's no way of knowing that, so you end up just letting them, bleed out and losing out on tens of thousands of points. The closest MadWorld gets to the combat system of a stylish action game that you're more likely used to playing, like Devil May Cry, is with the rapid presses of the A button and the launcher, but they don't generate many points at all, so instead of focusing on stringing together long combos on enemies, your goal is to interact with the level and use environments to rack up the most amount of points. For example, shoving a signpost through an enemy's head will get you about 10,000 points, but you can continue that combo if you're fast enough and put a barrel on top of the enemy and then shove them into a rose bush, and that's pretty much the entire combat system. As the game progresses, sure you can stick more signposts into your enemy's face and they take more punishment, but aside from that, you're just continuing to do what you did before. You don't learn any new abilities, and the environmental hazards and objects that you can pick up tend to feel more or less the same, but instead of just a different theme. Signposts turn into parasols, barrels turn into buckets, rose bushes turn into, well, they just stay as rose bushes actually, but my point remains that after the first 3 levels, you should have a very good grasp on how the game plays and how it will repeat for the rest of the game. There isn't enough variety in the game to really keep the gameplay mechanically interesting as, say, a Devil May Cry game. which is a shame since the game does quite a lot of things so very right. One of my favourite parts of the game is that the game features 2 Death Watch announcers that'll commentate over the game, and it's a surprisingly natural way of providing both information and entertainment.
I can tell you from experience that those happy pills work even better if you grind them up and inject them into the folds of your scrotum.
I'll give you $1 if you can tell me one thing that isn't better if you grind it up and inject it into the folds of your scrotum.
Aha, you got me!
It's an excellent way to incorporate tutorials into the game in a very natural way, since one of the commentators is a former Death Watch veteran and is giving his perspective on what he would do, which is a nice way to give new ideas to the player on how to rack up points. Unfortunately, the game doesn't do this for the majority of its tutorials. Annoyingly enough, it uses unskippable text dumps. I'm not 5, it doesn't take me an afternoon to read a short sentence. Let me just press the A button to confirm that I've read it, and let me get back to killing these fools to these sick beats already. Alright, the music. Well, I guess I spoiled my thoughts on the music, but the soundtrack is a big part of why I enjoy this game. Even though the mechanics are very simple, you can zone out to the music as you kill dudes in ludicrous ways and laugh along with the commentators. I think the game realizes it's a bit repetitive as well, since during the halfway point of a stage, a minigame called the Bloodbath Challenge is unlocked, where you play a short little game introduced by the Black Baron, who apparently has an infinite lives cheat code on, since during every introduction he dies, and yet he's right as rain the next time you see him.
What's going on, baby? Now, can't you see hey, what you doing? I'm talking to the people. I'm breaking it down. Ah, God, bitch! I'm gonna pimp smack your ass when I get. Oh!
Anyway, the Bloodbath Challenge is all about creating the most amount of bloodshed as possible, whether that be launching enemies into a jet turbine or making fireworks out of some ninja fools. It all basically ends up being just an easy way to get a bunch of points in a short amount of time. There are silly little sections, but they're enjoyable for what they are, and they provide a nice little break from the usual action, so I quite enjoyed these sections, and the Black Baron getting killed by Mathilda always made me chuckle.
Ah, hell no! Here goes my code.
The Bloodbath sections are where I find the black and white and red art style really shine, since you're in a small section with a bunch of enemies that you have to kill, which means blood getting everywhere is a guarantee, and it shows off the contrast between the lack of colors and the blood really well. Although, I think it's worth mentioning as a sort of, fun fact that the game isn't actually black and white and red, but rather, it's yellow and black and red. During development of MadWorld, Masahaki Yamanaka, lead character designer and art director, noticed that during testing of making the game look like a graphic novel by using black and white, it tended to just look like a picture that someone hadn't yet colored in, and it wasn't until the introduction of a desaturated yellow being used as a white that it all really started to click and create the MadWorld that we all know today. Anyway, back onto the game. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, blood. After completing the Bloodbath challenges, you should have enough points for the boss fights to unlock. The boss fights in MadWorld are very standard encounters that you're probably very used to seeing in action games. The boss fights are pretty interesting encounters, but unfortunately aren't very difficult, at least on the first playthrough. You just slice them up with your chainsaw until a power struggle is initiated. A power struggle requires you to input actions quickly during these timed events. If you succeed, you'll deal a massive amount of damage to the boss. Fail and you'll get harmed. Although I noticed if you ever fail, you tend to only take very little damage, so dying during these sections is pretty difficult. But even if you manage to do so, as long as you have a life remaining, you can just carry on exactly where you left off, right as rain. MadWorld is a game that's not very challenging and isn't very mechanically deep, but it's the type of game that is best described as style over substance. The game oozes style with its Sin City inspired graphic novel look, and also features an amazing soundtrack and funny announcers. Yet that's all there really is to MadWorld. It's a very simple little game, and at the time of this review, MadWorld is one of the cheapest Wii games I can manage to find, so I feel like it'd be silly of me to not recommend you pick up the game if you have a Wii or a Wii U. So I guess do yourself a favor and pick it up. If you don't, I suppose I can't be surprised too much. After all, we do live in a very mad world. Thanks for watching everyone, I hope you enjoyed it, and be sure to subscribe for more reviews of Platinum's games by me. Also be sure to head over to VGL to watch Mad Dragon's Dark Souls Let's Play. It's currently cancelled, but hopefully if we annoy him enough, he'll bring it back. Anyway, GG!